Welcome to the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show with Corey and Justin. Here they are, the Fourth and Long Fantasy Brothers.
Welcome in to the free agency recap show of the Fourth and Long Fantasy Football Show. My name is Corey, and I am here with my actual brother, Justin.
Hello, this is Justin.
Like I said, it's been a few weeks since we've released an episode. We talked about a free agency preview last time. Now it's time to go over what happened in free agency. We're going to hit you with our quick takes on the notable free agent signings, going position by position and discussing the fantasy football impact of each. Now, before we get there, you can now find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, something pretty exciting. Go check us out, subscribe, and leave a review. We're just, a couple of average brothers having fun on here, but we'd love to see some support. With that being said, Justin, how you doing?
Yeah, man, I'm good. We're going to cover a lot of ground today, folks. So, try to keep up here. Now, before we get into it today, Corey, kind of wanted to ask you, now that we've, seen free agency come and go, right? There's still a couple guys out there that have got to sign, but if you were going to recap the 2021 free agency period in a word or two, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Justin. I think I'm going to go with the phrase here and just say a year too late. I know that's a little bit more than a word or two, but this goes back to a conversation that we had a couple weeks ago where we talked about if you take a look at the list of talent that was available this offseason and you wind the clock back a year and a half, this is probably the best crop of talent that's been in a free agency pool in a long time. Fast forward to 2020 and 2021, and this list is kind of uninspiring. It's just so funny with how talent changes in the NFL. Superstars become kind of middling guys, and new names crop up all the time. How about you, Justin?
Corey, I totally echo that point, right? You look at some of the running backs that are still unsigned right now at this moment, right? Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, James Conner, all were respective round one picks in most fantasy circles back 2-3 years ago. It's crazy. If I was going to pick a term, I'd probably say uninspiring from a fantasy perspective. I don't really feel like we had that, home run winner, quote unquote. Maybe Aaron Jones or Chris Carson going back to their respective teams that keeps them in the RB1 range, right? But they were kind of already there, right? Most guys maintained or lost value, in my opinion.
Well, let's talk about that, Justin. We got a lot of stuff to cover, so let's get to it.
On today's show,
For today's show, Justin and I are going to go position by position. We're going to give you our quick hit takes on some notable free agent moves. We're going to discuss their 2021 outlooks and how their landing spots will impact the fantasy stock. Let's start with quarterback, Justin. The journeyman, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he signs a one-year deal with Washington. It looks like he's going to be the starter. What are your thoughts on that?
He's making his way around the league, right? Fitzpatrick to the Washington football team. I think it's a good move for the team in general, right? I think it helps elevate the stock of Terry McLaurin and, newly signed Curtis Samuel. It helps Antonio Gibson as well. I like the signing, Corey. I think Fitzpatrick will bring a new element to that offense when last year you had Alex Smith checking the ball down 15, 20 times a game. I think they're going to air it out this year. It'll be nice to see what they can do with that defense.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick is fun for fantasy, Justin, and I'm looking forward to what Washington's offense could look like with him under center. He's not always the most accurate. He's kind of a gunslinger. But with that being said, the risk is only for the NFL team. For fantasy, it could be a lot of fun.
Totally agree, Corey. Jameis Winston re-signed a one-year deal with the Saints.
Yeah, Justin, another gunslinger. So it's kind of the same mentality. May not be the best for the team, but he's going to be a lot of fun for fantasy. Michael Thomas, watch out. This could be a really fun year for him.
Yeah, the Saints also re-signed Taysom Hill, right, to an extension. I think Jameis Winston's the more fantasy-friendly quarterback. So if you're a Saints owner of fantasy-relevant players like Michael Thomas and Kamara, I think you're hoping that Jameis Winston ends up winning that starting job.
Heads up, Justin. Andy Dalton is going to be starting this year, and it looks like he's going to be starting for the Chicago Bears. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yuck, man. I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what to think, right? I think for the Chicago offense, right, it's going to be difficult to project what their team will look like this year. You look at they re-signed Allen Robinson. We'll talk about him in a minute. Talk about, Anthony Miller maybe getting traded here. I don't know, man. With Dalton under the helm and new quarterback, Nagy and Pace will be coaching and GMing for their jobs here. I don't really like the fit, man.
He may be the best quarterback they've had in years, though, and that's kind of a scary thing to say.
Yeah, man. Tyrod Taylor signed a one-year deal with Houston. What are your thoughts there, especially with everything circling now with Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like he signed as a backup. He may be the day one starter, depending on how things work out with Watson. If he's the starter, I'm not happy about it. I'm also staying away from him. I just don't think he's the fantasy football quarterback that you want on your team. Too much of a risk. I get he's got a high ceiling, but he's got a really low floor.
Talked last year about how Ty God was one of my sleeper quarterbacks, right? Didn't really work out with Justin Herbert emerging. But if Tyrod Taylor is the, starting quarterback for the Houston Texans, if something happens with Deshaun Watson, whether he's cut, traded on the commissioner's exempt list, I'm staying away from this Houston offense in general this year.
Justin, we had starry eyes talking about running backs, and one of those running backs was Aaron Jones, and we were just sort of thinking and dreaming about where he might end up. Well, he's back with Green Bay. He re-signed a 4-year deal. What do you think?
What's that I hear in the background? Is that A.J. Dillon's stock plummeting? I mean, my gosh, right? That guy had a world of opportunity if Jones ended up signing somewhere else like Miami. But Jones goes back to Green Bay, a multi-year deal here. He solidifies himself back in that RB1 range. I think I'm picking him, Corey, in the first round if he's there.
Yeah, Justin, there's no new team nervousness that you have to have here. He's going to be the same guy. He's going to be in the same role as last year. You can feel confident going in with Aaron Jones.
Yeah, another guy re-signed, Corey. Chris Carson here, re-signing with the Seattle Seahawks here on a 2-year deal.
Yeah, probably one of his best case scenarios fantasy-wise, at least to start the season. But I told you in our preview show, Justin, if this guy does not have someone to spell him, he's going to get hurt. So it might be fun for week 1 and week 2, but he will pop up on that week 3 injury report if they don't have someone reliable behind him.
That's the thing, Corey, right? Chris Carson just can't seem to stay healthy for the entire season. There's going to be those 3 or 4 weeks where you're going to be looking for your bench player to fill in his role. I think he's a solidified low-end RB1, high-end RB2 for the season this year.
Justin, I'm going to say this is the most polarizing situation that's going to be in fantasy football this year, if nothing else is done. And that's that Leonard Fournette has re-signed a 1-year deal with the Tampa Bay Bucks. I love this as a Ronald Jones owner, but I'm also hearing other people say that this tanks Ronald Jones's value. What do you think of Fournette back in Tampa?
I mean, Fournette had a great run, right, when in the playoffs, Super Bowl, right? He was, Lombardi Lenny, as they call him. But I don't know, man. I think if you're giving a full season to both Fournette and Ronald Jones, I'm taking Ronald Jones, man. I honestly am.
Yeah, I would like to remind you, they each had 4 games without the other. Fournette had 4 games without Rojo. Rojo had 4 games without Fournette. Fournette's 4 games without Rojo were because Rojo was injured. Jones's 4 games without Fournette was because Fournette was a healthy scratch. That should give you enough information right there.
Corey, a messy situation here is unfolding with the Las Vegas Raiders. They signed Kenyan Drake to a 2-year deal.
Yeah, Justin, I don't – can I pass? I don't know what to make of this. I think I'm going to stay away from this situation.
It's messy to say the least, right? I mean, Josh Jacobs was probably a consensus second-round pick, right, in my mind. And then Vegas drops a bomb and signs Kenyan Drake to a 2-year deal with some serious money tied to it, with some good incentives as well in that contract. I think Jacobs becomes more of a 4th, 5th-round guy, and Drake becomes one of those must-have handcuffs in the later rounds.
Justin, I don't think this picture is complete yet, but Mike Davis has signed a 2-year deal with Atlanta. It was nice in spots in Carolina last year. Do you think Davis is going to be the lead runner at Atlanta, or do you think they're not done yet?
I don't think they're done yet, Corey. He did look good with Carolina, but he looked gassed at the end of the season. There were those last handful of games where he just looked like he had nothing left in the tank. I think to your point, Atlanta's not done. I think they'll address the position in the draft.
Yeah, completely agree. I don't really need to say anything more. I like Mike Davis. I don't think he's the complete answer there.
Corey, Jamaal Williams, a young running back who was the backup to Aaron Jones in Green Bay, has now signed a 2-year deal with Detroit to back up young running back DeAndre Swift. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Jamaal Williams. As a matter of fact, in our James Robinson fantasy film room video, I did talk about how James Robinson reminds me of Jamaal Williams a little bit, and that's not supposed to be a slight on Robinson or Williams. I like his talent. He's a good all-around, all-purpose back. I think he's going to be a threat to Swift in Detroit, though I don't think he's going to overtake him at any point.
That's a good call, Corey. I don't think he's going to be biting at the heels of DeAndre Swift by any means, but I think he'll be, a spell guy, right? He'll probably end up playing 40, 45% of the snaps. Swift will be out there for 55 to 60%. They'll form a great 1-2 committee, but honestly, man, Detroit's looking like a bit of a dumpster fire this year.
Yeah, speaking of dumpster fires, let's move on to Chicago, who signed a 1-year deal with Damien Williams, who's been out for a year. He opted out because of COVID. Last time we saw him, he was winning Super Bowls. What do you think his role is in Chicago?
Yeah, 1-year deal with Chicago here. Familiarity with the coaching staff coming into Chicago with Nagy. I don't know, man. A lot of people are out there saying right now that it's going to put a dampen on David Montgomery's outlook. I think Montgomery will still be that 15 to 20 touch guy. Damien Williams, if he makes the team, obviously, right? We're not even at the point now where we know if he's going to be making the team. If he does make the team, which I expect he probably will, he'll probably be a spell guy getting anywhere from 5 to 7 touches a game. And Montgomery will continue to be an RB2.
Yeah, Justin, if you were going to draft Montgomery as your RB1 this year, this has to put dampers on it for at least for 2021. But I got to say, if I'm a David Montgomery dynasty owner, I like this move. You can't keep giving Montgomery the usage he was getting at the end of 2020 and expect him to stay upright. This is a good thing for him. This is going to keep everybody healthy. It'll make Montgomery a little bit more efficient, which I think is a good thing for him in the long run.
Corey, the Texans signed 2 running backs who, you're looking back a couple of years ago, you would have said, wow, what a signing here, right? They've got Mark Ingram and Phillip Lindsay, both signing 1-year deals with the Texans.
Justin, I'm staying away from the Houston situation.
That's it.
That's all I got to say.
That's great. I agree completely, Corey. I mean, I think that's the right call, right? I mean, this is going to be a most likely a 2 to 3-headed monster. I think you're still going to get David Johnson, who's going to be the 1A in this backfield, but there's no denying that Phillip Lindsay's a talented running back. And if something does happen with Deshaun Watson where he's not playing and we've got Tyrod Taylor starting at the quarterback position, this offense might be something to stay away from in 2021.
Yeah, and you know what? I shouldn't say that. That was more of a joke. I mean, these guys are going to have value at a certain point, and if they fall too far down, I actually like Lindsay's talent. I think Ingram's too old at this point. I don't see Ingram having much of a role, especially as the season goes on. Lindsay could be really, really interesting, especially if he becomes a late-round value. I don't know if he's going to be, though. I think he might be sort of a nice trendy pick for people, and I might just stay away. Speaking of trendy picks, will Marlon Mack be a trendy pick in Indy, Justin, this year? He re-signed a 1-year deal, but he's coming off of that injury.
Yeah, Corey, I like the signing for Marlon Mack. I think it will depress Jonathan Taylor's stock slightly, but I still think Jonathan Taylor's a rock-solid back of the first, early second-round pick at this point. Good for Marlon Mack, right? If he can pull himself together, get himself healthy, have a productive season, he sets himself up to go into his year 26 offseason with another shot at a big contract.
Yeah, Justin, I agree with you. I think this is him playing for a 2022 contract, and I think that's all it is. I still think that it's Jonathan Taylor's job full away. I think him and Hines are a more dynamic combo. Mack will just slowly make his way in, and by the end of the season, maybe get a couple carries.
Yeah, Corey. One of the more premier, what I think, landing spots here for running backs, premier, right, question mark, is the New York Jets, and they just signed Tevin Coleman to a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I want to say, Justin, that I think this picture is incomplete, but I just never know with the Jets. This may be their lead back going into the 2021 season. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. If that is the case, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. The Jets running back situation has not produced anything productive in the past 3 or 4 years. I'm probably staying away.
Yeah, they might address the position at the draft, right? They might end up getting a day 2 or day 3 running back that they can fill in there. Might be a position you want to stay away from in this offense.
Keep in mind, guys like Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, James Conner, these are all still free agents out there. I don't think we expect them to come over and take over any kind of job in any of these situations out in the NFL. But I will say that they are out there. They will most likely get jobs before the season starts. And at that point, we'll be able to make some assessments. So let's move on, Justin, to wide receiver. And let's talk about 2 guys to start things off who actually didn't even get into the negotiating process because they got franchise tagged. That's Allen Robinson and Chris Godwin. Either of these 2 sound appealing to you, Justin, for fantasy this year?
Man, as everyone says these days, right? Free Allen Robinson. He just can't get out of this quarterback hell that he's in for the last number of years. Franchise tag, making almost $18 million here with Chicago. Same thing with Chris Godwin, man. Good for them. Cashing in on the franchise tag deals. They could set themselves up for longer-term contracts here when the salary cap spikes in the 2022 offseason. I think if I'm picking between the 2 of them, I'm probably leaning Robinson just because he's done it before with subpar quarterback play. Godwin's got to fight for targets, obviously, with Evans, with Gronkowski, with O.J. Howard coming back, Cameron Brate, with Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones. I just think Robinson's going to have a bigger stranglehold on that offense this year.
Yeah, I think you said it, Justin. Allen Robinson has done it before with subpar quarterbacks. I still love him as a high-end wide receiver, too, this year. And Chris Godwin, look, last year people were too high on him. I had him listed as a wide receiver, too. And you were a little surprised at that ranking last year, Justin, but that's what he turned out to be because that's what I think he is. I still think he's a pretty rock-solid wide receiver, too. Remember, last year he was injured with that broken finger. A healthy season of Chris Godwin with Tom Brady could be a lot of fun, and there could be some sneaky value there.
Yeah, and good on both these guys, right? You're talking about a wide receiver market this free agency period that didn't really materialize, right? You didn't get a lot of big deals out of these wide receivers. And Robinson and Godwin cashed in on that franchise tag, and they're going to set themselves up to really cash in here in the 2022 free agency. So, Corey, let's move on to Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay, the former Detroit Lions wide receiver, signed a 4-year deal with the New York Giants.
Justin, I'll say this. A lot of people are thinking that this tanks Kenny Golladay a little bit because Daniel Jones is nothing to be too excited about. I'll say that we were hearing that Stephon Diggs was not a valuable asset last year because of the quarterback he was getting paired up with. And let's remember how that turned out. Listen, I'm not taking Kenny Golladay as a wide receiver 1 in this situation, but I will still probably take him around that wide receiver 14, 15, 16. And I think he's going to be ranked a lot lower than that.
Yeah, I think I'll be staying away from Golladay this year. It's very possible that Daniel Jones takes a next step in his 3rd season here with the Giants. But I think Galladay's been known as kind of that jump ball, sort of high point wide receiver, not really a big separation guy. We'll see if Daniel Jones can feed it to him, man. I think if I'm a fantasy player, though, and I'm in a redraft setting, I'm staying away from Kenny Golladay this year. I'm going to let some other owner invest a higher pick in him, and I'm going to look at other guys at that position.
Fair enough, Justin. Kenny Golladay is definitely a polarizing player. You know who's another polarizing player? Is a guy who signed a 1-year deal with Miami, and that's Will Fuller. What are your thoughts?
So folks remember, right? Will Fuller's got that PED suspension, so he'll be out that first week of the season. But he signed a 1-year deal with the Dolphins, and it's a good signing, I think, for the Dolphins as a football team. From a fantasy perspective, you take Will Fuller away from Deshaun Watson, you really can't paint it any other way than a downgrade, right? I mean, he'll probably still be a productive wide receiver, right? He'll give you those week-winning weeks, but he'll catch that long 70-yard, 80-yard touchdown from Tua. But I think I'm staying away from Will Fuller. Hopefully he can cash in next year and really get aligned with a really solid offense and a solid quarterback. And that's not me downgrading the Miami offense, right? That's another team that could take a really big step forward here this year. I just think for Will Fuller's fantasy outlook, I don't love it compared to last year.
Yep, Justin, I got to agree. Good for Miami, the football team. Bad for fantasy. Stay away.
So, Corey, another wide receiver here, Juju Smith-Schuster, only 24 years old. Apparently had a couple offers on the table here, but he ended up going back to Pittsburgh on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, this is messy. I really hate this situation for Juju and for all of the Pittsburgh offense. And I don't understand what Pittsburgh is trying to do here. This downgrades everybody, including Juju Smith-Schuster and all of his opportunities. I know Juju doesn't care about this because it's about football for him and not fantasy. But for fantasy, this just kind of muddies the waters, and I'm not excited about it.
Corey's average depth of target last year was like under 5 yards, which is absolutely insane. I mean, if you watch Pittsburgh games last year, the guy was getting targeted like Heath Miller, right? 4 or 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage, and he was just sitting down on the ball. The yards after catch was not there for Juju. Hopefully he can put it back together this year. But Corey, if you're ranking the top 3 wide receivers here on the Steelers, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster, what's the order you got them in if you're drafting them today?
Johnson, Claypool, Juju. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'd go the same. I think Claypool and Juju are kind of interchangeable, but I think Claypool's got the ability to take a next step, right, in his 2nd season. Juju, I don't know, man. We'll see. If I'm looking at him in a redraft setting, I'd be happy with him as like a wide receiver 2 or 3, probably more comfortable with him as a 3.
Yeah, Justin, we'll get into this as the offseason continues, but I'm going to say it now. You're going to hear me talk about this all offseason. I think Claypool might be benefiting from a little bit of a DK Metcalf boost, if you get what I'm saying. Freak athlete who people just really loved what he was able to do going down the field and ended up becoming a wide receiver 1. I think a lot of people are going to think that that's Claypool this year, and I think people are going to forget that it just doesn't always happen all that often. So I'm staying away from Claypool, but I can definitely see people drafting him as a wide receiver too.
So, Corey, I smell a little teaser here for our At This Time Next Year episode.
Yeah, and I think you might see him possibly feature in the bus. But either way, though, let's move on. Juju had a really strong ending to his 2020. So did T.Y. Hilton, Justin, who re-signs a 1-year deal with Indy. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't love it. Don't hate it. I was really hoping he'd move on so guys like Paris Campbell and Michael Pittman could just kind of have a stranglehold on that offense. You've got Carson Wentz coming into Indy here as the new quarterback. And another offense that I might want to stay away from slightly, I think for T.Y. Hilton, he might have another year or 2 left in him. I mean, look at the end of the season last year, right? He was producing at a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1 pace. It could very well happen this year, man.
Yep, Justin, and you said it. Wentz is a big deal. His past 2 years, which have not been T.Y. Hilton of old, he was getting the ball from Jacoby Brissett and a dead-armed Phillip Rivers. I like the idea of him getting Wentz. I like getting him late in drafts. He's going to be a really big value pick for me this year.
Yeah, I think he could be a good value, Corey. So let's talk about another Corey. Corey Davis here signed a 3-year deal with the New York Jets.
Yeah, Justin, I'm staying away. I think Davis did benefit a little bit from the A.J. Brown separation that he was getting in Tennessee, but he's going to go to New York, and he might be relied on as the number one guy, and I just don't think that's him. So I'm going to stay away because I see him possibly having 8th or 9th round value this year, and that's too high for me for Corey Davis.
Former top 5 pick Corey Davis here, never really solidified himself as a wide receiver 1. He did have moments where he flashed, right? But I think to your point, Corey, right? You're going to the Jets. You think that Darnold's going to be the starting quarterback. You don't know, right? You don't know what's going to happen at the NFL draft here later in April, but we'll see. I think I'm going to stay away from Corey Davis as well.
All right, Justin, let's get even muddier than we already are. A.J. Green, the 32-year-old A.J. Green, signed a 1-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals. Something you're interested in or staying away?
Staying as far away as possible. I talked last year about how I was already out on A.J. Green. I'm going to still be out on him. Guy hasn't played a healthy season in 2+ years now at this point. He's going to be 32 years old going into the season. He's over the hill. He might have those catches here and there. He might end up potentially playing that Larry Fitzgerald role if Fitzgerald does not end up re-signing with Arizona. I think I'm going to stay as far away from A.J. Green as possible. It's all about Nuke Hopkins in this offense for the Cardinals.
Same here, Justin. It's a really weird fit, right? Isn't it? Like Green is not going to be that get separation, get down the field, get ready for the ball from Kyler. So I don't necessarily get it.
Yeah, and then you look at the Arizona Cardinals, right? You're scratching your head because they invested a number of their draft picks back 2 years ago at the wide receiver position, and none of them have really materialized. And I don't know, man. I think I'm staying as far away from A.J. Green as I possibly can. Nuke Hopkins still dominates that target share. We'll see what happens. So, Corey, let's move on here. Let's talk about Curtis Samuel, 24 years old. We talked about him in our free agency preview show. Ended up signing a 3-year deal with the Washington football team.
Yeah, Justin, I may be the best possible situation for him. He's going in a situation that needs a clear-cut wide receiver too. And I don't know if I'd be so optimistic about this if it wasn't for that signing of Ryan Fitzpatrick. He airs the ball out. Seems like a nice fit for Curtis Samuel.
I was really hoping that Samuel would end up signing with the Packers, right? Like I originally predicted on our preview show, but Samuel's shown that he can be a dynamo. He could be a running, a receiving threat on, both sides of the field. And, we'll see what happens. I think if I'm investing in Curtis Samuel, I'm hoping I can get him in a later round. And, maybe the upside there is there with Fitzpatrick coming in as the gunslinger quarterback. But we'll see what happens. He's, reuniting with his old teammate, Ohio State teammate there with Terry McLaurin. So we'll see what they can do as a 1-2 punch.
Justin, one guy who just never seems to escape fantasy circles is Marvin Jones, and we're talking about him again. Signed a 2-year deal with Jacksonville. That seems a little murky.
Yeah, I think he'll just be a complimentary deep piece, right? I think he's more of a wide receiver 4 flex. I'm staying away from Marvin Jones. Good for him signing with another team, getting a 2-year deal from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Most likely will be catching passes from Trevor Lawrence. It's a good signing for the football team, right? For the Jacksonville football team, but don't love it for fantasy.
Yep, agreed. Don't have to say much more.
Corey, an interesting signing here, right? With Nelson Aguilar out of the picture and no real other guys emerging at the wide receiver position. You've got John Brown, who was recently released from the Buffalo Bills, signing a 1-year deal with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, Justin, I don't know what to think about this because obviously Ruggs, Edwards, like those young guys are still there. And John Brown has definitely struggled to stay healthy. I might be interested in late round values, but John Brown just always seems to be someone who I stay away from, and I never end up starting even when he does find his way onto my roster. So I'm probably staying away.
It's Darren Waller, and that's it.
All right, Justin, next up we have ourselves who you would probably consider the winners of free agency. I don't know if they were winners, but they definitely spent the most money, and that's our team. That's the New England Patriots, who signed Nelson Aguilar as their new number 1 receiver. That's a 2-year deal that he got. What do you think?
Wow, we've gone this whole episode so far without talking about the Patriots. I think we'll talk about them a little bit more here in a little bit. But, yeah, interesting signing. You look at some of the other deals that were given out to receivers, and Patriots definitely spent up for Aguilar. I don't know. I think with the other signings they had on the offensive side of the ball, the duo of tight ends they signed, Kendrick Bourne, the return of potentially a healthy Julian Edelman. Aguilar, I don't know about it, man. I mean, I like it as a football team positional signing, right? But I'm not loving it for fantasy football.
Yeah, Justin, I don't disagree with that. I need to see Cam Newton throw the ball down the field before I can sign up for any of his receivers this year.
Corey, the Detroit Lions receiving room has really been gutted this offseason, right? You look at Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones both leaving. Leaves TJ Hawkinson and then a couple wide receivers, Rashad Perriman and Tyrod Williams, both signing one-year deals with the Lions, will now be catching passes from Jared Goff. What are your thoughts there on those two?
Yeah, Justin, I don't think I'm going to waste much breath on this because I don't think the Detroit wide receiver room is finished. I think they'll be addressing it in the draft.
Couldn't agree more. They're going to be picking with a top 10 pick. They most likely will end up grabbing a guy like Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, maybe Waddle. We'll see what happens. I think there's going to be value somewhere in the Detroit wide receiver room. I just don't know if it's there yet.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Justin, one more guy that we're going to talk about is Deshaun Jackson. We're talking about him again. He's 34. He signed with the Rams, one-year deal. Any interest?
Over, under 3 games played for Deshaun Jackson this year, Corey.
I'm going to go under.
I think you're right, man. The guy just can't stay on the field more than a couple games now. I mean, he flashed early part of his career, and I think the name recognition sticks with him. If I'm investing in a Rams wide receiver, I'm obviously looking at Bobby Woods and Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, last but not least, Justin, let's touch on the tight ends. We have 2 big tight ends, the most coveted tight ends in free agency this year, going to the New England Patriots. Hunter Henry getting a 3-year deal, Jonnu Smith getting a 4-year deal. Is there really any value here? Tight end is a bit of a dumpster fire, so one of these guys might emerge, or is this just bad for everybody?
Yeah, Corey, there's going to be those 3, maybe 4 or 5 tight ends that most people are going to go into drafts this year looking at and looking for, but there's going to be value still. You look at Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith both coming into New England here, didn't have necessarily stellar years last year. They flashed an occasion. Jonnu Smith didn't even have 500 yards receiving. Hunter Henry had, 650 yards receiving. You're not talking crazy productive seasons last year. If they're the focal point of this offense, and if Cam Newton can look like he looked the first 3 or 4 games of the season last year, there might be some value here, honestly. I mean, you're looking at red zone weapons who can stretch the field on occasion. They're going to be in there probably on most every single down for this Patriot offense. I think the people that are going to be fading these Patriot tight ends here in Henry and Smith are incredibly nearsighted. You've got to look at the big picture here. I think they're both back-end tight end ones, right? If you're fading the tight end position and you want to take a stab, why not take both of them? Take both Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. See what happens. Maybe one of them emerges. Maybe both of them emerge. You look at the New England tight end history. You look at, Hernandez and Gronk, what they did back in the day, understanding it's not Tom Brady under the helm, but could very well see a 12 personnel offense that runs multiple tight ends on every down, and they could both be very productive.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a whole lot of assuming with these guys and assuming scheme and assuming talent because we haven't really seen what we've been promised with these guys. Tight end is a mess. You're going to hear me say this multiple times with this, so I'm okay with it. You could rank these guys 5. You could rank these guys 14. It's the way tight end is.
Ain't that the truth? Corey, let's move on to Gerald Everett. Signed a 1-year deal with the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I kind of like this one as a late round possible tight end. Gerald Everett always appealed to me when he was in LA, and I think he's a better athlete than what he's actually put up. He's someone who I wouldn't mind streaming or starting off on my bench or even just monitoring on the waiver wire because he can be a lot of fun, I think, and he's in a much better offense now.
I think you called it, Corey, right? He's a late round lotto ticket guy you can pick up. Maybe Will Dissly emerges in the Seattle tight end landscape. But, if Everett does, he's got the athletic tools, the pedigree there to really be a really consistent producer at the tight end position. We know that Russell Wilson likes to throw to his tight ends on occasion. Take the lotto ticket, see what happens.
Breaking news, everyone. Justin is still pumping up Will Dissly all this time passed.
Man, I love my boy Will Dissly. He served me well back a couple years ago for about a 6-game stretch.
Ain't that the truth? Well, a big lotto ticket guy last year for a lot of people was Rob Gronkowski. Seemed like a waste of a pick for a while, but then he came on, especially in the playoffs. Is this a mirage? Is Gronkowski going to be someone who's worth having?
I think he'll be an okay pick. You look at the Tampa Bay tight end position, and they're going to get OJ Howard back this year, and OJ Howard could very well step in and be a contributing member of that room. We'll see what happens. I think I'm going to be staying away from Gronkowski in general. He'll be a fine tight end is really all I have to say.
Yeah, I'm again, you take him 6, take him 14. I'm indifferent to this situation. He's going to have weeks. He's not going to have weeks. It is what it is for me.
It seems like that's the recurring theme here with a lot of these guys. Corey, Kyle Rudolph signed a 2-year deal with the New York Giants.
Nope. Staying away. Nope.
Well, there's even some talks that he might be cut because of a foot issue. So we'll see what happens. Evan Ingram's already there. Stay away from Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah, if I'm staying away from Kyle Rudolph, though, I am a little intrigued by Jared Cook signing a 1-year deal with Los Angeles. Kind of appealing because I like Herbert.
Yeah, the Parnham hype train is kind of docked for a little while, right? I mean, Jared Cook signing a 1-year deal here with the Chargers. You've seen Herbert's ability to, kind of champion that offense. He'll definitely take a step forward here in year 2. Could be a, 8 to 10 touchdown tight end. You can get maybe in the later rounds. He could be a very serviceable tight end, man, but we'll see. Again, we're assuming a lot here in the tight end position.
Yeah, I just like, though, Justin, Jared Cook is a tight end who all his career has been able to get down the field for big arm quarterbacks, and that just seems like a match made in heaven. Maybe I'm over-exaggerating here, but I kind of like it, and he's someone who I could easily see myself taking in the last round and being my starting tight end in week 1.
Yeah, Corey, and another interesting stat that I read as well was that Jared Cook and Mark Andrews' stat lines over the last 3 years are almost identical. You're talking about a tight end like Mark Andrews is probably going to be picked in the top 5, 6 of the position this year, give or take. You can get Jared Cook maybe at the 8, 9, 10 position and get similar production as well.
Yep, I agree with you, Justin. And there we go. Free agency has mostly come and gone. It's almost NFL draft season now. We'll be back in a few weeks with our NFL draft preview show. Remember to check us out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And as always, remember to subscribe and hit the bell, download, follow, like, comment, and whatever else you have to do to show some support. I'm Corey.
And I'm Justin.
And this has been the 4th and Long Fantasy Football Show. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Royalty-free music courtesy of Ben Sound. The views and opinions expressed on today's episode are that of the 4th and Long Fantasy Football Show. Remember to like and subscribe.